welcome back to my channel, and if you're new to my channel, welcome to Hurricane Rosie, where I talk about astrology, spirituality, sometimes give advice, and I'll also be having some travel vlogs for the Bali trip that I'm going on in I think 2 months or something. Very excited for that trip. So, if you're familiar to my channel, you would know that I'm doing a series on some of the signs that are said to be incompatible with each other, but I wanted to kind of explore some of these signs, some of these pairings, and explain why they are actually compatible if you look deeper into things like their ruling planets, their qualities, some possible things in their natal chart, and stuff like that. So for today's video, I'm going to be covering Scorpio and Gemini as a couple. So the first thing I always highlight in this series is the concept of the divine masculine meets the divine feminine. So the reason why I have made it a point to kind of always mention this at the beginning of this compatibility series is because the divine masculine and the divine feminine meeting together could actually be beneficial for these pairings. And the reason why I think it's good for masculine and feminine signs to get together is because of the concept of balancing each other out. So for instance, Gemini, it's a masculine sign, and Scorpio is a feminine sign. Typically these two always tend to go better with masculine or feminine. So Scorpio would go better with water or earth signs, and Gemini would go better with air or fire signs. But that's not always the case if you look at other aspects to a fire sign for Gemini or an earth sign for Scorpio. And the reason why I think that a masculine and feminine sign can work really well with each other if they're open to balancing each other out, balancing out their energies, is because it's kind of like it brings a yin-yang to a pairing, a relationship that I feel like a lot of couples don't really strive for and should strive for. So Gemini being an air sign, they naturally have traits such as rational, logical, more risk-taking, more adventurous, and feminine, being the Scorpio, they have more nurturing, more caretaking, more intuitive qualities. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about, is the divine masculine meets the divine feminine and how they could actually balance each other out. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is the dual personality, the dual quality of these two signs. A lot of people overlook the fact that Scorpio is ruled by 2 planets, and Gemini, its symbol is the twins. I feel like this gives Scorpio and Gemini a really interesting relationship because they both kind of naturally have this 2 sides to them. I also feel like it's really important to highlight that a Scorpio needs to be a high-functioning Scorpio. A high-functioning Scorpio is somebody who has become a little bit wiser and has healed from their trauma or is on their way to healing from their trauma. A high-functioning Scorpio is polar opposite to a low-functioning Scorpio. So a low-functioning Scorpio, whenever I think of a low-functioning Scorpio, I think manipulative. I think somebody that has not come to terms with the pain of their past, and somebody that has kind of crossed over to the dark side. Whenever I think of a low-functioning Scorpio, I think of how Faith from Buffy crossed over to the dark side and teamed up with demons. This is especially important for a lasting relationship between Gemini and Scorpio. The Scorpio needs to be a high-functioning one, because if it's a low-functioning Scorpio, these two would clash terribly, and they would most likely, in any case, would be better off as friends or nothing. So that's what I think of when I think of a low-functioning Scorpio. But a high-functioning Scorpio is somebody who has come to terms with their trauma, has worked through their trauma and has healed themselves, and is actually quite independent, does not need anybody to hold their hand. That's also something that Scorpio's fixed quality helps with, I suppose. So that's what a high-functioning Scorpio is. It's somebody who has transcended and let go of their trauma, their pain, does not want to inflict any pain onto others, does not want to cross over to the dark side whatsoever, is actually the most compassionate, the most loving version of themselves, and they actually want to help with that compassion. They want to take that power that Pluto has inside of them and do something good with it. Do something good with it for the world. So the aspect of duality that I wanted to highlight about Gemini and Scorpio is that they both kind of have characteristics that are polar opposite to them, and they kind of confuse themselves at times with what these two mean. What these two mean in terms of their dual personality. So Gemini's symbol being the twins, they have two sides to them naturally. One side is kind of like emotional, and the other side just shuts off all of those emotions. And Scorpio is kind of similar, but also extremely different. So Scorpio has kind of a problem with aggression. Scorpio has a problem with crossing over to like a darker version of themselves. And this is kind of what I feel like could be of benefit to these two as a pairing, is because Gemini also struggles with like a dual personality. So because Gemini is, the divine masculine, and is an air sign, which kind of gives them naturally masculine qualities, like they're intellectuals. They need to process everything rationally and make sense of themselves. They can be of great help to the Scorpio, because the Scorpio doesn't know how to make sense of themselves at times because of this dual personality that they have. They have this aggressive, fierce side to them that they don't really like. And just the same, Scorpio can do the same thing for Gemini, because Gemini doesn't really understand their emotional side, and they don't really understand how to work through it. They don't understand how to work through trauma, because trauma is such an emotional thing, I suppose. Trauma is something that you have to deal with by facing your emotions, and Scorpio is very much in touch with their emotions. So it's kind of like the divine masculine meets the divine feminine, and then they both have a dual personality, and they both help make sense of that dual personality, the duality that is inside of them, just naturally, because the twins and two different ruling planets. So that is what I wanted to say about the aspect of duality. Now I'm going to move on to their Mercury placement. So this is a very interesting part of this whole series, is the fact that I always aim to highlight their Mercury placements. So Gemini is in between Taurus and Cancer, and Scorpio is in between Libra and Sagittarius. So if you have looked up enough astrology natal charts, you would recognize a pattern where their Mercury placements are either always in the same placement as their sun sign, or before or after. So what I mean by that is Scorpio's Mercury placement is always either in Sagittarius or Libra, or in Scorpio itself. And same goes vice versa with Gemini. It's either in Cancer or Taurus, or it is in Gemini. So for instance, if the Gemini sun has a Mercury placement in Cancer or Taurus, and the Scorpio sun has their Mercury placement in Scorpio, the communication flow between these two would be pretty good. So the reason why it would be good is because obviously Mercury, the Mercury placement in a person's astrology natal chart is the way that they process information. It's all about the mind. It's all about how they communicate, how they see the world, how they process information, pretty much. So if the Gemini sun has their Mercury placement in Earth or water sign, this especially gives these two something to work with in terms of how they respond to each other when they're arguing, when they're just having casual talk, casual conversation, or, you know, having an emotional conversation. But even if the Gemini has their Mercury placement in Gemini also, and Scorpio has their Mercury placement in Libra or Sagittarius, it's the same thing, because Libra is an air sign, Sagittarius is a fire sign. So the interesting thing about like both of these, no matter what case, if it's Mercury Taurus, Mercury and Scorpio, so they're both like opposite signs of the astrological wheel, so they both complement each other in terms of communication. So they have a connection to each other. So if the Gemini sun, for instance, has Mercury placement in Taurus, and the Scorpio sun has a Mercury placement in Scorpio, they're opposites on the astrological wheel, Taurus and Scorpio. However, if the Gemini sun also has a Gemini Mercury, and the Scorpio has a Scorpio Mercury, this would be an even more interesting placement, because it's kind of like intuitive meets intellectual. So the way that they would communicate with each other would actually strengthen their bond instead of make it worse, especially if the Scorpio sun is a high-functioning Scorpio, not a low-functioning Scorpio. So the reason why these two, if they have their Mercury placements in Gemini and Scorpio, the reason why it would work really well is because Gemini helps make sense of the Scorpio, and the Scorpio Mercury, when speaking to the Gemini Mercury, they would be very intuitive. They would know when to back off, they would know when to pick a fight, they would know when not to pick a fight, if they're sitting in a room together and having a conversation, and the Gemini kind of like quickly wants to change the subject, the Scorpio would just know to go with the flow because of their intuitive nature. Because of their intuitive nature, they know when to like just flow. Especially because Scorpio is a water sign. So water signs, they do tend to go with the flow, especially a high-functioning Scorpio. So that's one thing I wanted to definitely highlight is like the Mercury placements, no matter where they are, they function well with each other. So now I'm going to move on to the quality of these two signs. So these two signs' qualities are a little bit interesting because Scorpio is a fixed sign and Gemini is a mutable sign. The way the qualities go from a ladder in my head that I'm drawing up is cardinal, fixed, and then mutable. So this is an important thing to note. As I mentioned, I think I mentioned briefly in my previous video, the reason why this is significant is because all of these qualities kind of give the vibe of what the zodiac will be like. So the fixed sign in Scorpio, especially a high-functioning Scorpio, would be of great benefit and help to a lasting relationship with Gemini and Scorpio because of the fact that fixed signs typically they're independent people. They don't like to rely on others. They like to be the ones who work things out on their own. And I feel like this is kind of an overlooked thing, and I'm not really sure why, especially when taking into consideration compatibility. Sorry, I just wanted to move the position of my camera because I felt like it, okay? Anyways, so the fixed sign in a high-functioning Scorpio would be of help to the Gemini and Scorpio lasting in a relationship, or even in friendship for that matter, because Gemini, being an air sign, they do need a certain amount of freedom. They do need a certain amount of space. And so does Scorpio. Scorpio needs space. They do. And I'm saying this as a person with a lot of Scorpio in my chart. We need space. But we need space for different reasons. So mutable sign Gemini needs space because they love their freedom. But fixed sign Scorpio needs space because they get overwhelmed if they feel like they don't have any time for themselves. They get overwhelmed. And I feel like maybe that could be a very generalized statement because, who doesn't need some space from time to time? But no, I feel like there are really clingy signs and really not clingy signs. But the reason why that these two need space from time to time is not because they don't love each other or they don't want to be together, but because Gemini, mutable sign Gemini, wants freedom, and fixed sign Scorpio gets overwhelmed if they are constantly taking in the energy of their lover. If they're constantly, because obviously Scorpio is a very, psychic sign, especially because of their fixed quality. They feed off of people's energy to a fault. They feed off of people's energy and they know things before it happens, and that is an extremely overwhelming thing to deal with, especially if you're in a romantic relationship. So they both do need a certain amount of space. They both do need some time apart. And this is something that I feel like a lot of astrologers get wrong about Scorpio and Gemini. I've heard astrologers say that Scorpios are clingy, and maybe sometimes they can be because, they're ruled by Pluto, but that's a low-functioning Scorpio. A high-functioning Scorpio is definitely somebody who doesn't mind the concept of freedom. And of course, other aspects in these two guys' charts would definitely strengthen their relationship, especially their Mercury placement. Their Mercury placement is so important. And it's such an interesting thing in general because it really is kind of like polar opposites meeting each other, the divine masculine, the divine feminine, and then they have this dual personality to them that for some reason they help each other work through. Like Gemini lightens the dark depths of Scorpio, and Scorpio shows the Gemini how to get in touch with their femininity. that I feel like the symbol of the twins naturally has. Their emotional dark side, you know, like their more emotional feminine side. So now I'm going to talk briefly about the ruling planets of these two signs. So ruling planet for Scorpio is Pluto, and Pluto is a very dark, mysterious planet, and Mercury is more of like just based around communication. The reason why I think that these two would definitely be an interesting pairing is because just imagine if a high-functioning Scorpio meets a Gemini and then they go forth with each other, revealing dark secrets of the world. Because with Gemini's Mercury placement for their planet, and Scorpio having all of this knowledge and all of these secrets, they could actually team up and shed light to a lot of hidden truths about the world. It's really interesting. It's really interesting. Can you believe how much they can do just by like working with each other and their ruling planets? Mercury is the talker and Scorpio is the one who knows. Like, Scorpio is the one who investigates and knows secrets and like explores mysteries all the time. Yeah, it could be a very interesting pairing. So that's it for Gemini and Scorpio, and I really hope that you enjoyed this video. If you're in a relationship with a Gemini or a Scorpio, I hope that this kind of like helped you see a different side if you guys are arguing or something. And if you're having a great time with each other, then I bet that all of these things that I highlighted, just like you love it. Especially I know Scorpios would probably be looking at this right now and just thinking, oh my god, she's so right. You Scorpios, I know you. You always just need to cling on to something to validate your feelings. So the next one I'll be doing is going to be, I'm not sure actually. I'm debating between Sagittarius and Taurus or Sagittarius and Pisces. I think I'll go with Sagittarius and Pisces. So yeah, click subscribe. Definitely click subscribe if you wanted to keep up with the series. And give me a like, leave me a comment, letting me know what you thought about everything that I said in this video. Click the bell thing, whatever that is, if you wanted to never miss a video. Click subscribe. I know I said that already, but I'm going to say it again. I also have a Patreon where I do astrology, natal chart readings, Western astrology. My forte is not really Vedic astrology, although I do try to do those readings also, because I feel like some people are more their Western astrology chart and some people are more their Vedic one. I have attempted to learn about Vedic as well. So yeah, if you wanted to grab a reading for less than $10, head over to my Patreon. I have them starting at $2. Sun and Moon readings, personality chart readings, compatibility readings. Oh my god, the sun has come up. I also have created a blog where I occasionally write my poetry. And I also did my first shirt design, so I'll link all of that below if you wanted to check that out. And now I'm just kind of rambling and I'm afraid that I'm boring you. I hope I haven't bored you to death with my rambling, and if you're still somehow watching this, wow, thank you so much, instead of just Xing out. Alright, reconnect with nature and find the balance that is within you always. And have a good day or night. Bye.